I'm Margaret Atwood. I'm a writer, and I graduated in 1961 from Victoria College. Okay, U of T, because it was here, I was living in Toronto, and my dad was a professor in the biology department. So actually, the real answer is it was cheaper. Why Vic? Because Vic had the best English department at that time. Number one. Number two, the Vic English department hired women. This was in the late 50s and early 60s. Harvard didn't hire women in the English department either. It was a fairly widespread phenomenon, and usually the excuse was we have high standards. Started off in philosophy and English because I thought that English itself might be too restricted, but then I realized that what philosophy wanted to do at that time was logical positivism, and that was not what I wanted to do, so I switched into the four-year English language and literature course. I was over-involved in a number of activities. So in those days, and you keep in mind that I already wanted to be a writer. It wasn't something I discovered at college. I already knew that. So at that time, there were very few people involved in the arts at university. There were no creative writing programs or any of that kind of stuff that you see around today. It didn't exist. You could take a creative writing class in fourth year called English 4.0, for which, however, you didn't get any mark. So some of us did that, maybe about 5. So my idea, I think, at that moment was, if I'm going to be a writer, how do I support myself? Because nobody expected to make a living at it. And I had several other bright ideas which hadn't come to anything. So I was going to take honors English, and therefore I would be able to get a job in some sort of teaching or other. It being the demographic in which you always knew you were going to get a job. It was just a question of which job. So there were more jobs than there were people to fill them, unlike today. Very few people in the arts. It meant that the people who were actively interested usually did a number of different things. So you might act in a play, you might write a play, you might write skits for a review, you might also then paint the scenery. You might just multitask in those kinds of ways, which is indeed what I did. So I was involved with the literary magazine at Vic, with the various theatrical activities, and the debating club. You can kind of guess the range of things that I was involved in. So he said, how would you like to have a Woodrow Wilson? And I said, no, I'm going to go off to Paris and live in a garret, drink absinthe, smoke cigarettes, write masterpieces, and die of tuberculosis. And he said, I didn't really say that. That was my idea. He said, well, I think, and be a waitress. And he said, well, I think you might get more writing done if you went to graduate school. So I did try being a waitress later on, and you know what? He was right. So I did apply for a scholarship at his suggestion, and I did go to Radcliffe, Harvard. Everybody was accepted as a female student. That wasn't a problem. It was at the teaching level. So Harthouse was off limits to women in general, except that you could act in the theater and go to the Arbor Room, and that was about it. So there were a lot of things that were men only. The Lamont Library at Harvard was men only. This was not an innovation specific to the University of Toronto. It was just the way a lot of places were. Well, first of all, I got to read through English literature from the beginning to the end. I should not say the end. From the beginning until where we were more or less then. Second, I got my early experience book reviewing, writing for the student publications. And of course, I made friends who remained my friends all my life. Some of them are still alive, some of them are not. And one of my co-students, one of the students in my year, was Dennis Li, who later co-founded House of Anansi Press, with which I worked in the late 60s, early 70s. So all of that goes back to my time at University of Toronto. So it was a very good education in those days, and I've stayed in contact with a lot of the people who were there then. There are so many ways now to help new writers that didn't used to exist, but on the other hand, there are so many new writers. So it's always a question of available space to number of people who want to fill that space. So when I was there, the available space was quite small, but so were the number of people who wanted to fill it. Now I think it's the opposite. The available space is larger, but the number of people who want to fill it is enormous. So the problem for a young writer now is, in this sea of other young writers, how do I, specifically me, even make myself seen or heard? You know, what do I do? Where do I go? How do I do that?
Totally.
So there are these resources available, but there are a lot of people clamoring to get into them. So I can see it as almost the opposite of the problem that we